Dr. Joe Weber. He is a friend for the campus. He has been collecting Roycroft objects, printing material, printing presses, and I'm sure that
I have to make sure I am off mute here. Okay, let's try this again. Welcome everyone back to our last speaker. Dr. Joe Weber is here to talk to you about the recent startup of the Roycroft printing press. And without further ado, I want to pass it on over to Dr. Joe Weber.
Hi, I'm Joe Weber. I've been associated with Roycroft since approximately 2004, and I have a number of projects. One of them is the printing. I've tried to rebuild the printing empire, which crumbled in the end of the 1930s, and their last book, or the last book using their symbol was probably 1943, the book Smoke Over America. I want to talk about a few things first. Last week, Rick told you about the development of the Roycroft Campus, and Alan told you about the Roycroft books. So I don't want to repeat any of that material. They were both great discussions. The Elbert Hubbard started printing and writing in the 1890s. He started writing probably about 1892, 93, unless we count some of the things that he contributed to magazines before that. However, by 1895, he saw the need to print some of the things that he was writing. And the people that he surrounded himself with helped him do the printing. He did the writing and the publishing. He tried to write inspiring books, and he also developed a magazine called the Philistine Magazine, which was an inspiring magazine. And these were what he was doing in the 1890s. He maybe published about a half a dozen books a year until 1900. Alan covered a lot of this material, and I'm not going to go into it in detail. But he did acquire printing equipment, and I was lucky to acquire his first press, and we have that in the print shop today. The other presses he acquired very quickly, because this first press was a hand press. Every sheet had to be printed by hand, and that was not very feasible, so they started printing on presses that were a little more automated. Now, let me show you the first printing shop. I'm new to Zoom, so you have to excuse me a little bit here. This was the first printing shop. This was built in East Aurora on South Grove Street, and this building exists today as part of the Roycroft Inn. You'll recognize the front of the building as the entrance where you enter when you're going to go into the Roycroft Inn, and then in the back is the towers. Now, up on the top, you'll see some vents on the steeple or tower, and that's where the Ruskin room was. And then right below that is the Morris room, and then the book production was on all the first floor, including the front of the building. It's interesting that that building looks like a chapel, and a chapel was also a word that was used by printers to identify the area of their business where they set type. So I don't know if that had anything to do with calling that the chapel. Immediately though, Hubbard began writing, as I said, inspiring books and magazines, and he acquired this printing equipment. He surrounded himself with people that were able to help him, and I'll show you some. These are some women engaged in illumining books. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the contributions of Elbert Hubbard to the arts and crafts movement. He didn't just bring the arts and crafts movement to America. He made some very significant contributions, which I want to tell you about before I tell you about what we're doing today. So let me show you this is as he got bigger, he had to change that building to something much bigger. And he built the building across the street, which is now the building that we've acquired. And it was the building that where all the typesetting and printing was done during all the years of Roycroft. Now, if you look at this picture, you'll see these young men working these presses. We have acquired one of these presses, and we've acquired replacements for all the others. These are called Colts Armory presses. They were made by the Colt company that made weapons during the Civil War, and after the Civil War, the companies like Remington went into typewriters, and Colts went into printing presses and typesetting machines, and they were considered the finest book printing presses available, and we have 6 of them. The next thing is that he, we said, he surrounded himself with people who could do the work, and this was first started with money that he got from Larkin. He was a partner of John Larkin in the Larkin soap company, but it was more than a soap company. It was a large catalog company, the 3rd largest catalog company in America, and he was a full partner in the business. And when he sold his shares, he didn't get very much money for it because we were going through a depression in 1893, and he only received $75,000, which today would be worth over $1 million. And so it was something that he was able to use, but he would have gotten a lot more if he waited. The first books that he printed, going back to that printing shop, the first books that were printed in the printing shop were bound in buffalo. They had no binding, but very shortly he ran into a binder by the name of Louis Kinder, who was trained in Europe and Leipzig specifically, and he was a fine binder, probably one of the finest binders in America, if not the finest. And he started the binding at Roycroft, and there were 3 types of binding. There was the full leather binding, and you'll see some of that in a minute. Now, this is the typesetting department in the new building, and we're trying to emulate that too, although we haven't cleared out the first floor, which is what we'd have to do to put it there. We've set up downstairs in an area of the press room, and we'll show you that in a minute, the typesetting facility, and made it as close as this is possible to, as close to this picture as possible. If you see the typesetting cabinets over by the windows, they always put them by the windows because until about 1890, the lighting was all with kerosene. So it was much better to have daylight and get your work done during the daylight, and then maybe use some kerosene at night if you needed it. Here's an example of one of the early books, the Book of Job. This was a fine book, and it was done by Hubbard in, you'll see, 1897. As I said, he did about a half a dozen or so books a year until 1900. But he was also doing the Little Journey series, which was inspiring biographies, a fantastic set of books. And you can buy original sets of this on the internet for $40 or $50. It's amazing. And everybody should read some of these little journeys. They're very, very good. And they're as good today as the day they were printed back between 1895 and 1915. The ones that were printed up to 1900 were done in parallel to what Albert was doing by the Putnam Company, and they were sold sometimes hundreds of thousands of copies of them. It was amazing the quantity of little journeys that were sold in the country. And this also brought income to Albert Hubbard, that he could run his handmade books and hand illumined books. And we use the word illumine if the book is printed and color is added to it, as opposed to illumination, where you would add whole artwork to the book. And we have an artisan, Nicole Witcher, who has added this artwork to some of our books. And we'll tell you a little bit more about her later. This is a book with a cover by Louis Kinder. At least we think it is. He didn't sign all of his covers. But this is an early book that was maybe printed in 1895. And this cover was probably put on by Louis Kinder when he came to the shop in 1897. And you can see this is as fine as any fine book binding that you can get from Europe. And this was done at Roycroft. Here is the message to Garcia, and this transitions us to the later books. The message to Garcia was printed by Hubbard at East Aurora in 1899, and this copy was probably 1900. That was a book that made a lot of money for Hubbard, which he put all back into the Roycroft. This book had the reputation of selling as almost as many copies as the Bible, and I don't know how they did their counting, but it was all over the world. When the Russians were fighting with the Japanese had Japanese copies of this message to Garcia that were given to all their soldiers and all of their civil officials. When the Russians saw this, they gave it to their people, and they got into at least 13 languages during Hubbard's lifetime. And I'm sure many of you have read Message to Garcia. And here's an example of an early title page done at East Aurora. This is printed with the artisans, or they call them illuminists, colored these. And I, as you'll see, have tried to copy this and bring it back alive again after it was dead. This stopped about 1915, and I started back up in 2004. So you can do the arithmetic. Here's another early book, and this shows a suede binding, which I love these suede bindings. They're as much fun to do as the fine bindings. And this shows some of the suede binding characteristics. A limp cover. They were called yap bindings. I don't know where that word came from, but as you can see, the floppiness of the leather as it hangs over the edge is there, and that's part of the charm of the book. Now we get to the earlier era, but there's a couple things I want to mention before we go to my books, which are illustrated there. There were a number of ideas that Albert Hubbard had that we shouldn't forget about. First, he developed the hand painting and hand illumining of books. This is something that nobody else had done to any great extent before that. And remember now, color printing only developed in the 1890s. So if you wanted any color in your book, you had to, before the 1890s, you had to put it on by hand. Now, Hubbard had that option in the 1890s. He could have gone with the printed books, and he tried a couple times, but the color didn't go on in register. Now that's the coordination of the color with what it was supposed to be added to on the book, it just didn't work for him. So he continued having his books hand illumined. The next thing was that his books were part of the success movement. Now, the success movement he started. Both Dale Carnegie and Orison Swett Marden, who were part of the success movement, they gave Albert Hubbard credit for starting it. And this was all the work that he did was intertwined with the success movement. We think of the success movement today with things like, as I said, Dale Carnegie and Napoleon Hill, but there are other practitioners in this field that are hired by business to inspire their workers and their executives. And Albert Hubbard started all this. And another thing he dabbled in was distance learning. Now, he got that idea from a newspaper editor turned educator who I'm sitting right now in a town 10 miles from where this man started his newspaper in Shenandoah, Pennsylvania. His name was Thomas Foster, and he developed the idea of distance learning, which we today call computer learning or internet. And he started this in 1890 when he gave up his newspaper, and he became the first and largest correspondence school in the world. He had the largest textbook printing plant in the world. Well, Albert Hubbard was a friend of his, and there's more to that story, but it isn't. It doesn't belong right here because of time constraints. But distance learning was one of the things that he pursued, and in 1910 he stayed home from a trip to Europe to work on his correspondence school. And we have some of the material from this, including the programs and how the students were supposed to respond to things. They were to read books, send in book reports, and then they would be corrected. And this he did this for a short amount of time, and he was dedicated to it in principle. So these are some ideas. The idea of illuminating the books, of following the success movement to help people be successful. And you'll see, I've tried to carry this on in my work. And the third thing is the idea of distance learning. When you get on your computer and participate in a course, you got to think about two people. You've got to think about Thomas Foster and Albert Hubbard and how they started distance learning, although it was through the mail and rather than over the internet. And you'll see an inventor a little bit later in our description here of the man who really allowed us to talk over the air and use high frequencies to send things over the air and do the distance learning that we're doing today. So many of these things are interrelated. Now, here is the copy of my first book called A Centennial Trilogy. As I said, I met Roycroft in 2004, and it was the next year was the 100th anniversary of the Inn. So I wrote a book about the Inn, and here is some of that book. This is the title page, and it's not too imaginative, but it's you'll see go back here a second. These what look like red lines at the top are not just red lines. They're all hand illumined squares with a very tiny brush, and it was just what I chose to use for the title page. And there's a picture of Albert Hubbard that I did on a digital printer. This is the the introduction, which happens to be a full history of the Roycroft Inn. And as you see, it has a hand illumined letter if you want to see. We go back there again. I don't know if you can blow that up on your computer or not. Alan, are they able to do that?
Oh, they cannot.
Okay, so we'll have some more big letters blown up for you. This is the Roycroft Creed. Now you might want to take a look at this. This is these are some things with with less than a year exposure to Roycroft. I determined that these were some of the things that Roycrofters believed in. One is and I'll read them to you. And I was going to say Americans dream of this, but I didn't have a capital A that to print it with. I only had a few of the letters that were designed by Sammy Warner for Elbert Hubbard, and one of them was an R. So I said, Roycrofters dream of an America in which the government exists to serve the governed, in which taxes are collected to pay for the legitimate costs of government, in which everybody contributes with head, heart, and hand, in which the cost of production has some relationship to the price of a product. Now, we haven't seen that in years, I don't think. In which politicians serve and then go back to their craft. Something to think about. In which persons treat others like they are the others, like they were the others. In which science is the servant of mankind and is not used to conquer people, ruin their health, and empty their pocketbooks. In which prices do not increase solely to allow some people to steal the hard-earned money of others, and in which politicians and economic power serve the common good and not used to subjugate population, and where honesty and truthfulness rule. These were the things that I thought the Roycrofters stood for, and I think in our final lecture today, I think it might be good to think about some of these things, and those of you that'll get copies of this program will have all that to look at and see if you agree with me. Maybe there's some you might like to add to it, so we could have an upgraded one. This thing's 15 years old. Okay, these are 3 of my copies of Message to Garcia, or as they say in East Aurora, a message to Garcia. I don't know where that came from, but down here in Ashland, Pennsylvania, it's the Message to Garcia. This is, I put this on so you can see a blow up of our hand illumining. Now this is, I do all this painting, and my wife helps with it, and we've had people in the shop that have helped with it also. But this is one that I've done, and that's just done. We do them on the paper and then put it in the book. Now, here the third thing I did was a biography of Elbert Hubbard. Now, this is thoroughly researched and written because my craft is writing just like Elbert Hubbard's, but I've added to it printing, hand illumining, and binding of books. So I have 4 parts of it, but the writing I consider the most important. And the whole idea is a beautiful book with a beautiful message, and that's what Hubbard was aiming at. You attract people with the beautiful book, and they pick it up, and then they read it, and they're excited about what they're reading, and the illumining and the fancy cover contribute to the message. And you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to get to the point where the people are looking too much at the illumining and the fancy stuff rather than what you're saying, because the message is the most important thing. So here's the title page, and you'll see this is all hand done again. The title takes me about 40 minutes to do one of these and do it well. And some of the colors, you want to try to get all the purples so that they're all the same shade. It's a little tricky. And then if you go do too hard, it comes through the paper. And but we're going to talk about some of those things later. I've also done the cheap version of these books. Now, the cheap version today is $9.95. The cheap version in Elbert Hubbard's day was 10 cents. And he made ones that look just like this. 10 cents times 40 is $4. So we sell it for $9.95, I guess it is. And this is a whole new biography of Elbert Hubbard. And I only write positive things. I don't write negative things about people. So I want to read a nice positive biography of Elbert Hubbard. You can get my copy. Now, I did another thing pretty early on, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Now, Elbert Hubbard did 4 or 5 versions of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Many of them were very beautiful. The first one was really gorgeous. He had people like, I'm trying to think of the people that did, a number of famous people did the introductions to his William Jennings Bryan, I think, did one of the introductions to his Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Now, as you know, Omar Khayyam was a man who grew up in the 12th century in what we call Iran today, and he was a real scholar, and he was with another man who, there were actually three men, and they were students of this professor, and apparently a fantastic professor, and they agreed that if any of them would meet with success, they would share it with the others. And the one man became the vizier of the Sultan of the first Sultan of Iran, or Persian as it was called then, and he then asked the other two what they would like, and the one man wanted public office, and he achieved public office, but he didn't do well with it. He got on the wrong side of the government, and he ended up with some renegades on top of a mountain causing trouble. And but Omar Khayyam said he'd like to have an observatory built for him somewhere in the kingdom where he could study the stars. Well, he ended up coming up with a calendar that was better than the Julian calendar of Rome, and almost as good as the Gregorian calendar that we use today. But he also wrote poetry, and the poetry is considered very good. Edmund Fitzgerald, an Englishman, translated some of this poetry into English, and I have done a copy of it. This is the title page. I did it in 2007, so that's 13 years ago, and I'll show you some. I did a number of things. I did the introduction and the bibliography, the biography of the translator. No, that was done by Michael Kearney. I did the introduction to the book, and I also did a glossary of Persian terms for it, but I don't have a picture of that. This is what the introduction looks like. That's a hand-done Lombardic initial up there at the top. And there's another, this is the biography of Edmund Fitzgerald at the bottom, and that's an F there, that's a Lombardic initial. And now here's some of the quatrains. The quatrains are 4-line poems, and there's either 96 or 100 or 140. The Germans have a copy in Persian that's close to 200 quatrains. So but Edmund Fitzgerald did, I think, 96, and that's now. I said I'd tell you about a man that had something else to do with distance learning, and that's this man is Joseph Mergus. He was a man who lived in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, about an hour from me here today, and he was a clergyman. He was a Slovak priest, and he invented high-frequency transmission, which was something that Marconi couldn't do. And this is what has become today developed, that the principles of it developed into what we have today as television, internet, things like this. They can all be traced back to this high frequency transmission. So this is the fourth book I did. I really thought that this story needed to be told. This we did in pretty good quantity. I did 7,000 copies of this. The next one is about our fearless leader, Johannes Gutenberg, the man that invented the printing press and the movable lead type and the good ink that could be used with these pieces of equipment. And it's completely researched, and all kinds of new things about Gutenberg that people haven't known. Book's only 40 pages long. It's amazing what you can get into 40 pages. The next book is about Gregor Mendel, an Austrian monk who introduced mathematics and statistics into biologic science. Before that, it was all, shall I say, all armchair. You sat in a chair and you came up with theories. And Darwin was sort of the end of that, although he had done some research in beetles. It was a theoretic science, but not for Mendel. Mendel, as you remember from your high school days, started studying pea plants and their heredity. And he developed a number of laws of heredity, all of which stand today. And of course, they've been amplified by the knowledge of DNA and the nucleic acids and things like this that have, but none of them have in any way altered Mendel's laws. And Mendel, the interesting story about him is his ideas died out and they didn't come back. People didn't discover them. He wrote in the 1860s, and his works had to be rediscovered in 1900. Now, there's a few things that I wanted to mention here. Well, first about it is Augustus Welby Northmore Pugin. Now, this man started the real Gothic revival in the 1830s. He was an architect, and his father was a great draftsman. And his father developed a few things like the idea of when an architect is going to present a building to people that want to buy the building or pay for it to be built, he would put the building in its environment with people standing around on the bottom. And one of the things that his father developed, but the son learned to draw. By the time he was 12, he could draw Gothic buildings. And then he developed the Gothic revival in the 1830s. And very interestingly, this was the same time that John Ruskin was starting to write. And he wrote a book which came out in serialized form, the music of architecture, and that book was serialized in an architectural magazine. And to this day, I keep wondering whether Pugin had read Ruskin's articles in that magazine. And nobody can seem to tell me that, but research sometimes turns these things up. Anyway, you'll notice that the binding looks a little medieval. It doesn't look like something that was done around 1912 or 2012, does it? Well, that's a binding that I developed. That's fairly easy to do. You cover two boards with leather, and then you have the template made that goes front and back on the left side, and then you put some nails in it, and you have a medieval cover. And it can be a lot less expensive than a full leather binding, of which you'll see a couple of in a few minutes. This is the initial letter. I had some more pictures to show you of the so the work of the Pugin work, but I was afraid to put them into the, I'm new to Zoom, and I thought I might not be able to get back into the program. Without Alan, I wouldn't even be this far. This is a large capital A, and that shows where we're going with illumining. You'll see some things that we've added here. The grapes, for example. Grapes are great to paint because no matter how you paint them, if you don't make them solid purple, you'll be able to show the reflection of light on them, and it makes them look very realistic. The other thing is the leaves. Sometimes leaves look good if you let them light out at the end, and that's something that's happened here. Now, here's the book on John Ruskin. This was my biography of John Ruskin, again, thoroughly researched, and there's some very interesting things in the back of it that tell about how the crafting stores today and things like this have a lot to owe to John Ruskin. John Ruskin not only developed the art angle in the arts and crafts movement and the art appreciation, but he did a lot for crafting, and he supported crafting. He supported the lace industry in England, which was handcrafted. He also, with his Guild of St. George, started a craft community and appreciation for crafting, which continues to this day. And the organization is very active, and we at Roycroft work very closely with them. They've come over here to visit us, and some of our people here have visited them in England. Here's the title page to my Ruskin book. It carries a date of 2013, and that's all hand illumined in there. The design around there, and there's a nice picture of Ruskin over on the left. Here are our 2 pages. I apologize for how dark these are. They should not be that dark, but again, I was afraid to go in and correct it, that I might disturb something as not being a Zoom expert. And so but you'll see how we did some of these letters. There's a letter. The idea of bleeding the color down is a lot of fun because it makes the letter a little more exciting. Here's a book on William Morris, again with the medieval binding. This one has some stamping on the front. The nice thing about stamping the front of the book with these medieval bindings, if you ruin it, you can throw it away. Where the last thing that's done, that book I showed you by Kinder, if he made a mistake, a serious mistake on that book, you're talking about something that back then had a price tag of maybe $75, but today, that in today's money would be $1,000. So you'd be very careful stamping the covers of books. So this one here, I didn't mind doing because it was on my medieval binding, but you'll see that when I do full bindings, I try to put a label on so I don't ruin the book. There's my book on Elbert Hubbard. Now, this is also thoroughly researched, the book on Elbert Hubbard, and I wanted to tell you a little thing about some of the contributions that Elbert Hubbard made. We talk about Elbert Hubbard as bringing the arts and crafts movement of England over to America. Well, there's more to it than that. Elbert Hubbard made at least 8 distinct contributions to the arts and crafts movement that people don't think about, but they're all covered in detail in this book. Now, I'm going to just go through quickly with them. Beautiful book binding. Morris gave you the book in a paper bag. You went and you got it bound by somebody. While many of Ruskin's books were very well bound, they oftentimes would come in a form that was lesser. But Elbert Hubbard wanted nice bindings, and the next thing was color. Now, Ruskin had some great color in some of his later books that George Allen provided. Now, George Allen was a friend of Ruskin's and actually a student at one point, about 1850, and then he went into engraving, and Ruskin eventually made him his publisher when he got tired of Smith Elder. And he George Allen put some chromolithographs in some of the books, like the Stones of Venice, and they were fantastic. But by and large, the Ruskin books didn't have color in them early on. Albert Hubbard saw that with his team of illuminists that his books all had color. The next is an arts and crafts community. Now, Ruskin started an arts and crafts community with the Guild of St. George, a community that continues to this day in England. But Albert Hubbard blew it into something really big. He had 500 employees at one point, and so this was a major contribution, a functioning arts and crafts community. He even had farms that provided the food for these 500 people to eat. So he really gets an A+ on establishing an arts and crafts community. The next is humor. There's a little bit of humor in some of the early books of the arts and crafts movement, but there's a lot of humor in Albert Hubbard's books and in the things that he said, and people enjoy that today. The next thing is the initiatives that the Roycroft added. One was initiatives of good work environment. He would provide musicians and lecturers to come in to talk to his employees. And the state of New York recognized his Roycroft organization as one of the finest places to work, that they really took care of their employees. And you know today, maybe 1 in 10 large businesses take a serious interest in their employees. Some of them do it sort of half-heartedly, but Albert Hubbard did it with a passion. The next thing was the success movement. He added the success movement to the things in the arts and crafts movement and turned the arts and crafts movement in the United States into something that could propel people to be successful. And this is what we're trying to do today. The next thing is the correspondence school. I won't belabor that again. He started that in 1910, and it was 20 years after his friend, but he really added that to the arts and crafts movement. And we at Roycroft have taken this very seriously. Alan can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we had over 1,500 students one year taking our courses, our workshops, and our lectures, and these were done at the college quality information that we were relaying to people. And the 8th thing that Albert Hubbard added that was not added, Morris dealt with it a little bit, but was world peace. Albert Hubbard had a very strong interest in world peace, and I'll give you a quote which was, I think, very important. I have it printed in my Centennial Trilogy. He said, "While I do not know anything about it for certain, it is my opinion that on the last great day, folks that stayed around home and pruned their vines and tended their flock and loved their wives and babies will fare a deal better than those other men who made war on innocent people and tried to render them homeless." So I think that should be engraved on the State Department, on the door going in to the State Department in Washington. But I guess it's a little too big of a quote. So anyway, to go to our next slide, Poems for Roycrofters. This is a book. I read about 1,000 poems, and I found 30 of them that fit the Roycroft principles. including one that's engraved on a bronze tablet about 3 blocks from the building that I'm in here in Ashland, Pennsylvania. And that I'll read that poem to you. It's real quick. Count that day lost, that whose deep departing sun falls not on some worthy action done. That's the whole poem. And this was done by Mark Atkinside, a physician poet back in the 1700s, who thought he was going to be the next Milton. It didn't happen, but some of his work was very good. Also in that book is the last poem is Beethoven's choral symphony from the Ninth Symphony. There's choral movement from the Ninth Symphony, and it's I didn't have time to translate it. It's still in German in Frachter letters, so you might like that. So like German. Okay, there's Morris and Hubbard. This is a book comparing the work of Morris and Hubbard. I had some pages of this that I was going to provide for you, but again, I was afraid to put them in that I might ruin my program. So but there I used the big Chaucer frames that were in Morris's Chaucer that he did at the Kelmscott Press, which Hubbard was offered for £5 in England when he visited the Kelmscott Press, and he turned it down. Today that book is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Hubbard should have bought about 10 of them. Anyway, the next is Hidden in Plain Sight, a book by Kitty Tarjan and Hugh McKeag. I hope Hugh's in the audience. He was a great help to Kitty, and they wrote this book together. The fantastic thing about the book is it has Kitty Tarjan's autobiography at the end, and I don't know if we have a picture of that. This is a version of it in paper. We made a paper version that would sell for $9.95, and it as well as this version in suede. And you see that suede looks pretty much like the original Roycroft suede. It has the silk lining on the inside, genuine silk lining. It's a nice book. And this one was done in a paper version, and this title page, and we do illumine that title page more than that. I don't know how the unillumined one got in here, but Nicole Witcher, our artist, designed that title page, and she has the 2 roses down at the bottom, the ordinary rose and the Roycroft rose on the right. That was designed by Dard Hunter, the third art director of Roycroft. And you may know about him. He did some fantastic things. Now, Hidden in Plain Sight, the cover for the cheap version of that was also designed by Nicole Witcher, and you'll see the color. This is how we usually color the title page. But on the left side is a temple that the Rosicrucians built down around Doylestown in Pennsylvania, out in the woods, and the right side is the Roycroft Inn, and we show how they were related. Actually, part of the Roycroft Inn looks a lot like that temple. If you look at that roof on the top of the building on the left, it looks a little bit like the roof on the top of that first print shop, doesn't it? See, so Alice and Elbert Hubbard were involved with the Rosicrucians early on, and they liked some of their ideas. This is The Future of England. Jim Spates suggested I publish this. He can tell you more about it. It says called The Future of England. It's really about the future of the world, and this is John Ruskin's contribution to world peace and some good ideas how we can run countries and things. You'll see that's another one of our illumined title pages. You can be the judge as to whether that sizes up to some of the early stuff. Here's the inside of one of the the biggest books we've done, and this is the Nature of Gothic, which is that chapter I told you from John Ruskin's Stones of Venice, and this book has, here's the title page. As you can see, it's quite elaborate. This title page takes a day to do, and it has the bleeding W there with the ink bled down on it. And this book is probably the biggest thing that I've done so far. That has 113 illuminings in. There are some of them. These are all done by hand. And this type was not reset. This was kept in William Morris's type from the Kelmscott Press, and a copy of it was bought, and the binding was cut off, and I made offset plates from it and printed this on an iTech offset machine. And here is William Morris's Kelmscott symbol in there, identifying the book as produced by them. If you look at the top, this is a colophon. Here endeth the Nature of Gothic by John Ruskin, printed by William Morris at the Kelmscott Press. So these little things we add to all our books too today. And but William Morris never got around to putting color into it, so I thought it might be nice to color it. This is Morris and Hubbard. This is the Morris and Hubbard book, and the symbol here is the Roycroft Renaissance, which is the symbol of Rolla, which is a crafting organization connected with Roycroft, as well as they also have a guild which has a relationship to them, and the people function in both of those organizations and make fantastic crafts today. I mean, this is you almost, when you say arts and crafts, this is well above that, the level that these people function at. And there's me with Elbert Hubbard's first press in the shop, and you can see you can see the type cabinets on the left. You can see some presses there on the one press on the left, to the left of the press. In the background is Elbert Hubbard's Colts Armory press that we have. And now this is the illumining room. This is where our artists and illuminists work, like Nicole Witcher, and we try to set it up to look just like the old days. And we have a library for our people on the right side, one bookcase full of history, another bookcase full of crafting, all kinds of things on crafting. And they can come here. Anybody that works with us can come here and look at these books. They can borrow them if they want. Anything that we can do to help improve things. And we're looking constantly for people that will come and help us illumine books and take the book arts to a new level that we're trying to establish. And they can come and learn it with us, and then they can do it from their home. We can send them pages in the mail. They can illumine them, send them back, and I'll bind them. So it's not something that you have to keep traveling to East Aurora for. And in the mixed up situation we have today, it's something that people could really do, and then see what they do in see the results of their efforts on sale. If you look in the back, behind the tables is a display about the Roycroft Print Shop that we take around to shows. Here's the library. As you can see, and we'll be adding more bookcases. We have a lot more books than that. This is a book, The Philosophy of William Morris. I selected 5 lectures from out of his probably 100 lectures, but there's 5 that I wanted 4. I wanted one for each of the things that I like to see the arts and crafts movement defined as: architecture, art, crafting, and philosophy. And I thought I'd get 1 lecture for each one of those, but there were two of them on crafting that were so good that I had to take the two of them. So, and here is the last part of my talk today is the newest book called the Roycroft Virtues. This book is done in suede, but will be coming out in a cheap version, possibly with the colors or the initial letters in color. And you can see from this, you can see the silk lining on the left, the silk stiffener, we call it. And these take about 15, 20 minutes to make. They're very, very touchy. But if you look at it, the detail there, the corners are perfect and everything. I'm happy to show anybody how to make them. And we'll you just get in touch with Alan, and he'll get in touch with me, and we can sit down and show you how to make any part of the book you want. If you want to write, if you want to hand illumine letters, if you want to print, if you want to make parts of the book and do the binding, all of those things. Or if you want to do all of them, that's okay too. And there's the title page of the book, The Roycroft Virtues. Now, we'll let you in on what the Roycroft Virtues are. These are virtues that I've studied over the last 8 years that bring success to people. And these virtues are understanding, gratitude, respect, good manners, contentment, and equanimity. And each one of these is covered in detail in this book. And I think it really gets us full circle. These are the things that Elbert Hubbard liked. These are things that would help people, make them better people, make them more successful. And that's what this new book does. And on the left-hand side is a display that I had at one of the Raleigh shows at Christmas time, and it's a treasure chest with some of our books in. And if you look at that, you'll recognize that some of these were the books that we talked about. So that's really all I have to say, but I want to emphasize that we're after you. We'd like you to come and help with some of this, and we hope to, if you want to just help by buying and reading the books, you can do that too. They're available at the Roycroft Copper Shop. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. Appreciate not only your talk, but all of the wonderful images that you have for us to see as well. I know we had quite a few different questions pop up in the chat while we were going through, and just so everybody knows, Joe is having some speaker issues on his computer, so he can't hear through the computer, but I have my phone on so he can hear me talking to him, and he can then give us answers through his own screen. So a couple questions during your talk, Joe. First one is a question about the typeface. In your book about the Roycrofters' Creed, you had talked about a typeface by Samuel Warner used in the Sentinel book. Do you know what the name of that typeface was?
Oh, the typeface now is the design of the type for the letters. Samuel Warner was the first art director, and he designed those initial letters in the beginning of the chapters, like for the Roycroft Creed, that large R, Roycrofters believe. I don't know what it was in Appalachia. Remember that big A I showed you for the pigeon?
Right. Is there a
they were different. No, that's not a typeface. That's an initial letter. And the initial letters that I use are only two styles. The one are the ones done by Sammy Warner, who was, as I said, Elbert's first art director. And the Centennial Trilogy is all those letters. The Hubbard Biography is all Sammy Warner letters. They require me to do gold leafing of the frame that goes around the letter, and it's a little more work. And so the William Morris letters don't have a frame around them, but they're beautiful. Those William Morris letters, when you blow them up, you can only blow the Sammy Warner letter up so much, but you can blow the William Morris letter up to the size of the page if you want. And but now the typefaces, the typeface, Albert Hubbard had about a dozen typefaces that he liked, and you can find these in some of the earlier biographies of Hubbard, including that great one that was done of the shop, the book about the shop. And but Bookman Oldstyle was one. There was a linotype face that he liked. There was one called I didn't come prepared to talk about these, but there was about a dozen typefaces he liked, and I like Bookman Oldstyle, and I do most of the books in Bookman Oldstyle, although I sometimes use some of William Morris's typefaces, which are Golden, Chaucer, and Troy. Now, Chaucer and Troy are the same typeface. He just gave a different name to the two different point sizes. One was about 14 point and one was about 12 point. He couldn't, he had started out with the 14 point one, but when he was going to put all of the Chaucer into a book, there wasn't enough room for it, especially with his gigantic frames that he put around them with flowers and things on. So he gave it a different name and called it Chaucer because he was going to use it for Chaucer, but it turned out to be very useful for a lot of other things. So we try to use all typefaces that Albert liked or would have liked.
Thank you.
So, Linda Ulrich
Don't
Hagner,
use Times New Roman, for example. You won't find that in any of the books.
Joe, Linda Ulrich Hagner, is In Plain Sight available at the Copper Shop?
Joe, is In Plain Sight available at the Copper Shop?
Is what?
In Plain Sight?
Hidden in plain sight.
Right, hidden in plain sight, right.
It is from time to time, but then they run out of copies and I have to make more of them. And with no help, it becomes difficult because I have a day job that takes a lot of time.
I'll give him a call this afternoon.
But if she wants to leave her name with you, Alan, we'll see that she gets a copy.
I know where she lives, yes.
Is this Linda?
Yes.
It is Linda, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we'll see that Linda gets a copy of Hidden in Plain Sight
Okay.
with Nicole's cover on the front.
It's great.
Joe, there's a question about a couple of your different covers, especially the ones that were done in somewhat of a medieval style, has the gold ornamentation. Do you have foil stamping capabilities at the Roycroft Print Shop?
We certainly do, and I do in my own print shop. I have quite a bit of foil stamping capabilities. I have 4 Kensall foil stampers. I have many smaller ones. I like to use the Kingsley stampers and to make my labels and things like this because they fit right on my work table and they're very easy to use. But we have great foil stamping capabilities. We could stamp the whole cover of a book if we had to.
Great. Do you do any collaborations with the Western New York Book Art Center, Winbuck?
Yes, I'm a member for 10 years, and I'm very good friends with the man that founded it, Rich Kegler, and he, in fact, he makes digital type, and he makes it William Morris's type. You want to print something in William Morris's type, you just buy his program. It's only like $25 or something. It's not. You're not buying something from Bill Gates, for $300. This is he has a great thing, and his museum up there, and I can only call it a museum, connected with their organization up in Buffalo is tremendous. And I would recommend that anybody that's interested join that organization. I've been a very active and devoted member to that for all those years.
Joe, I have a question. I was very taken with your Roycroft Creed. And I'm wondering whether it reminds me very much of Ruskin's Creed of the Guild of St. George. But what I'm wondering is, I thought it was so well done, whether there's like a poster of it that you could get at the copper shop or keep it up in a, I don't know, prominent way so people could have it and buy it and put it up at their home.
So
What do you, yes?
what Jim was asking was about if there is a poster or anything of the Roycroft Creed that is available.
Oh, but I'll be happy to make one. I'll, that might be a good project because it's something that everybody can agree to. If I have to say, I can't find anybody disagreeing with any of those things. The next time you buy a pill and it's $500 for the bottle of pills, you can find that a reference to that down there on the list there, you know.
And we also had a few questions regarding the Roycroft Virtues. So I don't know if you might be able to send me a list of those and I can pass them on to the group.
Well, these are things that are absolutely necessary for success. Now, this is sort of it's not a plug or anything. It's just that I've worked on these 6 virtues for 6 years. You've been working on 6 virtues for 6 years. Now, they're not real virtues. They're not ethical virtues, but they're things that they're virtues when it comes to business and professions and politics. Anybody that follows these 6 things will I think they'll be oriented in the right direction. But this is what Roycroft is all about. We're teaching people crafting and a good philosophy, and we're teaching about art and architecture. So we have 4 things going for us here, and this is part of the inspiration side.
Question regarding, do you know, was Albert Hubbard familiar with the Linton Press at Ruskin's Brentwood home?
No, but I hear that there still is a printing press over at Ruskin's home in one of the rooms. I want to say in the garage, although I don't know, they didn't have a garage there, but in one of the outbuildings. And I've been trying to find out about that to see if they want to get that going again, and I'll be happy to help them. If they need some more presses or anything, I'll ship them over there for them.
A quick comment from Holly Bird. Wonderful presentation, Joe. I've wanted to know what you and Nicole and the print shop have been up to. Beautiful work. You and I talked a few years ago at a Rolla art show, and I would be very interested in talking to you about doing some design and illustration with type high relief printing and perhaps some engraving. And I will be passing your contact information along to Holly and to you, and you guys can chit chat offline.
Yeah, we need to get together with people like you and get rolling with these projects, because we have many of these books printed and they're not found, and we just need people that will help us, and as well as contribute ideas. We need ideas for the next book, you know, what's coming next, you know. We need minds working together.
What do you attribute the financial demise of the Roycroft Press before your revival of the enterprise?
Well, it's easy to find out why a business fails. Probably a lot had to do with the Depression, because people needed to spend their money on other things. But then, you know, you would think that there were enough successful people during the Depression. I mean, when you look at some of the cars that were made then and some of the houses that were built during the Depression, you'd think there would have been sufficient interest, but somehow there wasn't. And then the war came out, and that just put the lid on the whole thing. And there's the last Roycroft book we usually talk about is the book about who was the gentleman that was the governor of Massachusetts, was it, that they did a biography, a full leather binding on it in 1940. Now, this was people that took over from Albert II. And then a very famous book, a very unusual book, I won't say famous, came out in 1943, long after we think of the Roycroft as meeting its demise, called Smoke Over America. And this is one of the four important books about smoking. And two of them came from Roycroft. One was by James I of England, who wrote it anonymously because I guess he was making money on the Virginia plantations that were growing tobacco. And the second one was Elbert Hubbard's cigarettist in 1910 that told a lot about cigarette smoking. That was more of a pamphlet, and that we will be reproducing so that people that follow this misguided activity of smoking cigarettes can learn something. But then the Smoke Over America was written by a man by the name of Atomic Mercer in Reading, Pennsylvania, about an hour down from me here. And he wrote this. It got published under the Roycroft name with the Roycroft symbol. And this was, if this book had been published by Putnam's and sent around the country and people read it, maybe thousands, if not millions of lives could have been saved. We had to wait till the Surgeon General Terry's report in 1978 to really get things going about smoking. And today, people get in line to buy cigarettes at convenience stores, and they just don't get it. But Roycroft produced two of the four milestone books in against smoking.
Alan, I have one more I'd like to ask,
Okay.
Joe. I was also very taken by your list of major contributions that Albert had made to the arts and crafts following Morris and Ruskin. I thought that was really good and very important for Roycroft and for us over here on this side of the Atlantic to know. Have you written that up? Is that a pamphlet? I mean, that's sort of like the Creed to me. It's something that is very important that should be available to everybody.
What is this?
So Jim, why don't you just run through that one more time for me, and I'll pass it along to him. You're looking for the Creed or for the Virtues?
No, neither. I'm looking for his list of major contributions of Elbert Hubbard to the arts and crafts.
Joe, so Jim was wondering about your list of contributions that Elbert Hubbard made to the arts and crafts movement.
Yes, I just wrote this down since we talked this morning, Alan. I took it out of my Elbert Hubbard biography. It was one chapter about the additional contributions, because everybody, said, well, he brought this thing over here and copied it. He didn't. He added more. Each one of these men added more to it. Pugin, for example, talked about the principles of architecture that people needed to follow. And then Ruskin talked about art and art appreciation, wrote extensively about it. And Morris, of course, made lectures. He was involved in 15, 20 crafts that he did himself. He'd be doing needlework at home to try to perfect the craft. And then, of course, they were all involved in the philosophy and social awareness and things like this that were important to all four of these men. And but Hubbard did have these 8 contributions. And you know what? I'll come out with a pamphlet on that, and so that we can get the message out that the things that Elbert Hubbard did, he just didn't sit on what the others did. He appreciated it. He published some of their books. He published a book about that Mr. Knight showed about the Ruskin and Turner. That's a beautiful book. Did you see did he show you the why with the sailboat in? That some fantastic things in that book. So these men all build on each other, and Albert Hubbard built as much as the others build on each other. And the arts and crafts movement today is what it is because of all four of them.
We got to start winding this down here. One more question for you, Joe. Do you know anything about, or do we restore any of the original Roycroft bindings? Because I know they do deteriorate quite a lot.
That's tough. We try to use permanent materials in the books today. You see how some of the pages have crumbled in the Roycroft books. I use only the finest paper that I can buy, the finest Mohawk or classic laid paper. Many times it's watermarked to show its quality. This paper should last forever, like the Gutenberg Bible. I don't think that they knew quite as much as they know about paper today. While Dard Hunter eventually became an expert in paper, I don't think he was as interested in the archival quality of it. But I in the beginning, the first book, that Centennial Trilogy, I found out that I had to pay $500 for the box of paper, and 25 by 35 inch sheets, and then I had to cut it down to get into the press. I've found since that time there's many sources of paper, like printing places going out of business. You can go to the auctions and get them. So but the quality is very, very important, and and we try to build that into for example, the suede. Our suede should last a very long time, as opposed to these that are drying out. But every once in a while, you get a Roycroft book that's perfect. Now, the question is restoring them. If you restore a suede book that's crumbling, you have to put a new cover on it. Right. And I don't know anybody that's doing that, but you know what? I think it's something we could do. And if someone's interested out there in repairing books, let's start repairing Roycroft books so that many of these that are in bad shape can be brought back to life.
Well, thank you again, Joe, and for all of our speakers that have been with us over these last 5 weeks. It's been a wonderful journey. I hope you have all enjoyed as well. Once again, if anybody's interested in learning more, the campus does have a history course starting up again next Saturday, and one of our speakers from our conference that kicked it off for us, Jim Spates, will be speaking next week Saturday on, what do you know, John Ruskin. But the following weeks we'll be looking at William Morris, we'll be looking at Gustav Stickley, and we'll be looking at not Albert Hubbard, but his son, Albert II, who we know as Bert. So hopefully I will see some of you back here again in the coming month. And if not, thank you again. This was great. Thank you all to the speakers once again. And we hope to see you on the campus maybe in 2021. That would be great. Everyone stay safe and well. And once again, thank you.